Hello, and welcome to The Nine, featuring community conversations, news, and stories that matter from each of the towns, villages, and hamlets that together comprise Caledon. I'm your host, Sherilyn Roman. Each episode, we'll hear from Caledon changemakers, charitable organizations, community activists, and community champions. We'll talk about the environment, politics, human interest stories, arts and culture, and more. In this episode, we'll be talking about an issue that has been occupying the residents of Caledon since May of 2025, and an issue that could potentially impact those same residents for generations to come. Perhaps you've heard about Swan Lake. It's a beautiful, fully rehabilitated groundwater-fed wetland bordering area farms located in Ward 1, Caledon. It is now home to a variety of flora and fauna, trumpeter swans, hence the name, turtles, and many other species. It's also been under threat for months. It's at risk from the potential consequences of a motion put before Caledon Council last May. At risk from the possible actions of its current owner, who had been seeking to dump construction fill into it. And it's even at risk from proposed changes by the provincial government to the Environmental Protection, Conservation Authority, and Water Resources Acts. Understanding the issue of Swan Lake isn't just important to Caledon residents, but potentially has far-reaching consequences across Ontario. Join us today as we learn more about the politics of water. Hi and welcome.
Thank you.
Here to help us unpack the issue today is local resident Carrie Parfitt, who has become the de facto face of a community movement to save Swan Lake. With a background working in 2 different municipalities and a firm understanding of both the Environmental Protection Act and the Water Resources Act, Carrie has worked alongside many other passionate and concerned residents to delegate at council and bring attention to the potentially devastating consequences of using Swan Lake as a dump site for construction fill. Welcome again, Carrie.
Thank you for having me.
There's a lot to dive into, but for viewers who are maybe not as familiar with the Swan Lake issue, including what it is, where it is, and why it matters, I'd like to kind of go back right to the very beginning. I understand that a motion was put before Council, Caledon Council, in May of 2025, and I know the language might be important here. I understand that the motion referred to the area as an old aggregate pit, and that a member of town staff even called it a hole in the ground. So tell us a little bit about the motion and why it initially caused so much concern.
So the motion was brought forward in May by the mayor on behalf of a developer, and the language in the motion did say to rehabilitate an old aggregate pit. And that language is very important because the site where Swan Lake was an aggregate pit operating up until 2021, and then it underwent rehabilitation. So now it is a fully rehabilitated property under the Aggregate Resources Act. So what has been rehabilitated cannot be revisited to be rehabilitated again. That's pretty distinct underneath the Aggregate Resources Act, which is an act that is administered by the province of Ontario. So for a municipality to come forward and say that they are rehabilitating a pit, that's not something a municipality does. So the language really matters here because legally, Swan Lake is no longer an aggregate pit.
Okay, and so, you talk about legally, and I think that that's really important as well. So if I'm understanding correctly, the motion potentially could have allowed Swan Lake to be filled with millions of cubic feet of possibly contaminated soil and construction debris, and this is even though the Ministry of Natural Resources has said the Swan Lake has met the requirements and been rehabilitated.
That's correct. So the estimate from experts was, I believe, 288,000 dump trucks full of fill that it would take to actually fill the Swan Lake and to fill the property. So the property is approximately 90 acres. So that's how much fill. And the guesstimate was about 10 years that it would take. So that's 10 years of dump trucks coming up Highway 10 across Charleston Side Road into this property to fill it to agricultural land was what the motion had said, to bring it back to agricultural land, and that's what the developer had said that they were interested in doing as well. But as I said before, it's not a pit, so it doesn't fall under rehabilitation like so many of our pits do. So rehabilitation is something that's mandated under the Aggregate Resources Act by the province. But this rehabilitation was completely done. Lafarge did what they were supposed to do according to the Aggregate Resources Act. They did a great job, and it is now basically a wildlife preserve. It's a wetland lake. It's filled with wildlife, and it's directly connected. This is a really important factor as well. It's below water table. The pit was below water table when it was operating, so it's directly connected to the groundwater that feeds the wells of all of the surrounding residents, two of which are farms, and one of which is a farm that's open to the public and that serves the public in terms of agricultural products.
So that is a great introduction to the next question, which was going to be what surrounds Swan Lake, and what are some of the consequences, not just for what we referenced in our introduction, the trumpeter swans, the turtles, the species, but for the community at large. So you started to talk a little bit about the groundwater. Yeah. Maybe tell us a little bit more about how serious an issue is this, and possibly impacting Caledon residents for generations. Mm-hmm. So the water is the biggest concern to me personally, and it's also something I'm very familiar with my background of working with municipalities. Around Swan Lake is Chickadee Hill Farms. So that's a farm that is has agricultural products that is open to the public and serves the public, and they do have animals that they care for on site. And then there's also Belaine Farm as well, which is part of the Ontario Farmland Trust, so that is protected land. And on the other side of Swan Lake is land owned by the Credit Valley Conservation Authority. That's part of their Pits to Parks project. So that has been completely, basically reinvented for the public in terms of what will one day hopefully be recreational trails and nature area that people can enjoy. That's what surrounds Swan Lake. That's what surrounds Swan Lake, which again has been fully rehabilitated. Yep. And we're potentially looking to destroy that. So the impact to groundwater, just for folks that might not be as familiar with how a well works and what happens if the water becomes contaminated. Mm-hmm. So groundwater, which a lot of us in Caledon are on groundwater. Our water doesn't come from Lake Ontario. For many of us up here in the rural areas, our water is fed to us from aquifers underground and from water that is moving underground. And protecting those water resources is vital to our health and our wellness. And we do have areas called source protection zones that are in and around large municipal wells. But the outlying areas that are outside of that rest under the protection of the Ministry of the Environment, Conservation and Parks. Sorry, they changed their name. It used to be Ministry of the Environment. So that is who is in charge of protecting our groundwater resources. Once a piece of property is deemed fully rehabilitated. So it is the Ministry of Environment, Conservation and Parks that is responsible for that, protecting that groundwater for all of the residents who are in and around that and are getting their water from private wells. So the water is being drawn up through the well, and it's being filtered through people's own private systems that they would have. And some people may not even filter their water, they may not need to. People will have their water individually tested for bacteria contaminants, and it's my understanding from the property owners around there that they have never had an issue with their water, that their water is pristine was the word that they used. Okay. So it's very risky to dump fill below the water table, because you have, even when that fill is tested, you have no idea really what's in that fill, because well, and I understand, and not to put you on the spot for a specific statistic, but if we picture a dump truck full of soil, I understand, or I've seen references that it's a teacup's worth of soil that they're testing. Yes. So that sounds like things might get missed.
Yes, I've heard two different measurements from soil experts, but the most I've ever heard is half a cup for a dump truck full. So what's in the rest of the dump truck? Right. And that's also too to say that everything in that situation would have to be done completely legitimately and totally above board. So that means nobody's ever sneaking something in there. Nobody's ever putting something in where no one's looking. It's just a very, very risky venture to be dumping soil below the water table where it's directly going into our groundwater resources.
Right. Even if it was accidental, even if something made its way in, it's still, the point is that we're at risk.
We are.
Our drinking water.
It's very risky.
Is at risk.
It's very risky, which is why traditionally it's never been allowed. These are new changes that are happening.
Right. There's another change that's happening as well that I think is related to this matter, and it has to do with Caledon's proposed site alteration bylaw. Hopefully I'm calling that the right thing. Can you tell us a little bit more about this bylaw and the potential impacts?
Sure. So back in May, when the mayor brought forward this motion for Swan Lake to fill, for the developer to be given permission to fill Swan Lake, when I got involved, I sent an email to our commissioner asking directly what the implications were and why we were doing this against all of our own bylaws, because we do have an existing bylaw in Caledon that doesn't allow large fill operations at all.
Okay.
We're not allowed.
So this is we're changing potentially the bylaw altogether.
We are.
Okay.
Yes. So our current bylaw says that we're not allowed to bring more than 10,000 meters cubed of fill in anywhere, period. We don't allow large infill operations. And then we also, this motion also went against our zoning bylaw. So our zoning bylaw doesn't allow fill to come in on property other than property that's zoned agricultural. I think it's A1, 2, and 3. But this property is not zoned that. This property is still zoned extractive industrial, which only allows for aggregate to be moved out. It doesn't allow for anything to come in. So when this whole project started, this whole proposal started, I asked the commissioner, and I have this email, I asked the commissioner about these bylaws and about the fact that this motion went against these bylaws. And the answer I received was that yes, it does, but don't worry, because we're creating a new site alteration bylaw that will address all of these concerns. So that was back in July. And that site alteration bylaw did come forward, and a lot of public pressure made it so that we were able to see the draft of it. So it has been available for public comment. A lot of members of the public have made comment on it. But the way that this draft reads, which as I understand is coming to council sometime in the next few months, and no one has seen any revision of it after their comments.
So the public, July of 2025, just to be clear, that's what we're talking about. It was sent back out to the public to provide input.
I actually believe that happened in September, at the public open house. They had an open house about the site alteration bylaw in September.
But we've seen and heard nothing since then.
That draft bylaw came out. It's still available for people to see. It's not available for comments anymore. So the comment window has closed, and many people did make comments, but the town did not issue any type of a revised document. So no, nobody knows if any of the comments were taken into consideration. Yeah. So it's really important because that site alteration bylaw has one part, there's many parts in it that are an issue, but one part that would have a direct implication to Swan Lake is that inside of the language allows our commissioner to have complete authority over whether or not a large infill operation would happen without it having to go to council for approval.
So I did understand that correctly when I read that, and certainly I think that's concentrating an awful lot of authority and decision making into one individual's hands. Mm-hmm. So we could potentially have an area like Swan Lake filled in. You referenced all of those trucks on the road. So not just making a decision about whether or not fill can go into a site, even though it's been rehabilitated, but all of the trucks that are on the road, everything associated with that, and then of course the ongoing risk to groundwater.
There's a risk
all potentially in the hands of one individual.
Absolutely. Yeah, and that's where I, as a concerned citizen, have a real problem with that, because I think that we elect our councillors to represent us, and I think that any type of, first of all, I don't think the large infill operations are something that should happen in Caledon at all. I think it's just too risky. But at the very least, these decisions should be coming to council.
Right. Yeah, I mean, that's sort of how democracy works. or it's how one hopes that democracy works.
Yes.
Right. Right. Okay, so talk to me a little bit about some of the more recent developments. I understand that we, and I'm saying we, you've done all of the legwork with your group of supporters. In December, I think, of 2025, an MPP for Kingston and the Islands, that would be Minister Ted Hsu. He helped the Swan Lake cause by defining Swan Lake according to the Ministry of Natural Resources. Tell me, do a better job than I am of explaining what that is.
No, you're doing a great job. And first of all, I just want to say the we is absolutely appropriate. This is a huge community effort, and so many people have been helping out behind the scenes. So many people have put huge effort into this. My face has been on a lot of things, but it is not just me at all. So I really, I'm really super grateful to all the people who've been involved in it. Yes, so the big thing about Swan Lake that makes it different and really important to define legally is that we are surrounded by pits. We have pits everywhere. And there are pits all across Ontario. And rehabilitation is a huge commitment that the aggregate companies take on when they take on these properties. They're mandated to rehabilitate the properties under the Aggregate Resources Act. Unfortunately, sometimes that doesn't happen more often than we would like. But this is a situation where exactly what was supposed to happen did happen. Lafarge did an exemplary job. They did everything they were supposed to do. The property has been fully rehabilitated to standards that were in the plans. So to then come in and say that this work basically wasn't done, because you can't rehabilitate twice, to basically come in and override that. And also too, the municipality can't override the province. This was a provincial mandate. So that's why that definition really matters. Okay. And inside the Aggregate Resources Act, a property that's been rehabilitated is no longer a pit. So the legal definition matters a great deal. And Swan Lake is now defined by the minister as a water feature. That's how they've defined it. And that question that Ted Hsu asked for us was really important. So he asked the Minister of Natural Resources directly in Parliament on behalf of the citizens of Caledon, which we're very grateful for. He's not our MPP.
Right.
From pretty far away.
That's another question. How did he get involved? Thank you.
Yeah.
When we have a MPP serving this area.
Yeah, I can get that to that in 1 second. But so he did ask the question in Parliament, and they did answer the question. And he asked about the legal definition. What is Swan Lake legally defined as now that it has been fully rehabilitated? And their answer was, yes, this is a water feature. It's no longer an aggregate pit. And that matters a great deal, because it cannot be filled in under the auspices of rehabilitation. That's not what's happening.
And that answer, it's been asked, it's been answered, and now that's part of the legislative record as well. It is. So after that happened, I'm inclined to think that that's good news. I mean, we're happy about that. And I also understand that not too long after, there was a meeting of Caledon Council, and this matter came back before our Caledon Council. The mayor said that the matter would not, after the decision is made, which I'm going to ask you about, the matter wouldn't come to council again prior to the municipal election. And so I would sort of take that to be good news, but maybe it's not.
So I just want to be clear about sort of the way that the events transpired, just for the public so that they understand.
Absolutely.
So, MPP Ted Hsu asked the question in Parliament. The answer came back that it is not legally an aggregate pit anymore. Within, I believe it was 48 to 72 hours, the issue of Swan Lake in terms of a memo of an update from the commissioner landed on the agenda. Now, it landed on Caledon Council's agenda. Now, Swan Lake hasn't been on the agenda since May, when the motion first came forward. In July 8th, about 200 people showed up at the council meeting because we thought we could delegate to it because it was in the minutes, and we were shut down and not allowed to delegate. So since the time when it was first presented to council, when all of the awareness happened, no one's had an opportunity to speak to Swan Lake legally on the record in council chambers. So within 72 hours of that decision coming from Parliament, Swan Lake made it to the agenda, which meant many of us could now delegate for the first time.
Right.
So there were a lot of us who did go and who did delegate. And at the end of that, council reconsidered their motion that was brought forward back in May. And now this is just my opinion, but I do believe they were prepared to reconsider it. They had quite a statement prepared.
Right.
So they did reconsider the motion and took it back that they were listening to the people. Within the 72 hours of the decision coming from
the provincial
government
legislature.
Yes.
So possibly a coincidence.
Possibly.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
The part about it being good news or not good news, and it's not going to come before council again before the election. We know, or I think we're making some assumptions that this isn't over.
Yes.
There's a couple of questions here. So I know, for example, there's another pit nearby, the Willoughby pit, that came under the auspices of the provincial government, and it's recently been allowed to start dumping. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Okay.
And that's a really serious issue too.
Right, because it's nearby.
Yes. It is.
So still the same potential impacts to groundwater?
Absolutely. Okay. Absolutely. And the same issue, but happening at a provincial level. So much less control over how that's approached. A lot of people made comments. I was one of them. There are many people who made comments when that ERO came out.
Right.
But they weren't listened to. So again, dumping below the water table is not something that's traditionally done. You can see that at C3 Quarry, that they turn that into a beach and a recreation area. There's a lot of examples of aggregate pits where every time they go below the water table, they don't fill it in.
Right.
They turn it into some type of a water feature, whether it's recreation or whether it's fishing or aquaculture or whatever, but they don't fill it in because it's dangerous to do that to the groundwater resources.
And I think we have some examples that we might be able to look at of you mentioned C3. I'm actually quite familiar with C3. I swim there as often as I possibly can. Kelso, there are a number of beautifully rehabilitated former aggregate pits and quarries that are lovely places to be now. And Swan Lake falls under that category.
There are many examples.
Right. But again, with the site alteration bylaw, just for clarity, that will come up again at some point, but we don't really
So in terms
when?
of Swan Lake being done or safe,
Yeah,
or
how might it resurface?
Yeah. So at that council meeting in December, the mayor was very clear that this issue will not return to council again this term. I believe that's a direct quote.
Yeah.
Really close. You can look it up. It's on the, anybody can look it up. It's on the video. That's probably true. I actually think that is true. But something that could happen is that the site alteration bylaw, which is supposed to come in the next few months, if that piece hasn't changed, if the commissioner still has all authority to allow massive fill operations without it ever coming to council, well, and that bylaw passes, then the developer could fill in an application. That application could be accepted by the commissioner, and the commissioner may not send it to council, so the public may never see it again. So
it's true.
That statement could be true.
The statement is true.
And Swan Lake could still wind up being filled.
Right.
Under that scenario. I'm not saying that's going to happen, But I'm saying it's a possibility, and that nobody in the public's been able to see a second version of that draft or a final version of that draft. So we have no idea what's in that bylaw, and we won't know until it comes to council.
And if I understand this correctly as well, the property owner still owns the property. I understand that there were some efforts made. I think we have Regional Councillor Early to thank for sort of trying to step in and work together with the Credit Valley Conservation Authority to potentially look at purchasing the property at a fair market value. So you talked about pits to parks, back in the beginning of the show. Like that would have been potentially a wonderful opportunity, but that didn't happen. No. So the property owner still owns the property.
He does. So that offer was made. So former Regional Councillor Ian Sinclair actually made the proposal to Regional Council, and then Councillor Early sort of moved the needle forward on that project. And they, the Credit Valley Conservation Authority did make an offer to the developer. It was a fair market value offer, is all the public was told, but that offer was turned down. So there's multiple ways that the property is still at risk. Yes, is what it sounds like to me. Yeah, I mean, nobody has any idea why that offer would have been turned down. Was it not a fair offer? Are we hanging on until the site alteration bylaw is passed? Are you making a nature preserve? Nobody knows. Right. I suppose, a nature preserve is possible. He cares a lot about people's health. He really does. Donates a lot to hospitals, right? So, I mean, anything's possible. Anything's possible. Carrie, tell me, what can concerned residents still do? So it sounds like, as you mentioned, lots of people have come out to delegate. They have filled out the Have Your Say questionnaires and those kinds of things online. What can we continue to do to support Swan Lake? So I think the big concern now for the residents of Caledon, very specifically, is this site alteration bylaw, and whether or not we are going to start allowing large infill operations and dumping below the water table. And all of those issues are all wrapped up in that bylaw. So I think that, the more people who contact council and express their concerns about this bylaw, and it would be wonderful if the public could see it again after comments have been received. It would be wonderful if the public had access to that and could see the decisions that have been made, and if any alterations have been made before it goes to council. This site alteration bylaw is a huge deal for us. It will change everything about Caledon, not just with truck traffic, with air quality, with water quality, but also with how land is used and all of the food that is grown in and around all of these places that are now going to become massive fill operations. Right. So the consequences truly, I think going back to the intro again, potentially could be felt for generations to come. Oh, no question. Agriculturally, road traffic, impact to our water systems. We could go on and on. No question. And you can't take it out. Once it's in, you're not taking it out. Remediating groundwater is unbelievably difficult, and I don't even know if it is possible once you have years down the road. Right. So it really is about protecting our water resources, what lays beneath the ground. Thank you. Thank you, Carrie, for your time today. Thank you as a citizen, a resident of Caledon, for the enormous amount of time and energy and research and outreach that you have done together with, a team of supporters. It's I think, been very helpful to understand what the issues are around Swan Lake and what the potential impact is to our local water systems. Yes. So thank you again. Thank you for having me. I really appreciate you helping to get the word out. Thank you. Thanks. There's the notice.